2023 is just getting started, and already we've got a ton of great looking new games. Last month brought us a couple of these. There was the Rain World Downpour expansion, the remake of Dead Space, and that surprise rhythm combat game Hi-Fi Rush that was just announced, released, and seems to be a hit already out of nowhere. January wasn't bad. Bit sad how Forspoken turned out, but the writing was on the wall ever since the demo release of that one. February, on the other hand, is looking to really kick off the year. We've got some seriously fantastic looking games, many of which have been highly anticipated for a while. Let's start off by taking a look at the 7 best looking new games, and as always, these are in order of release date. Kicking things off is Deliver Us Mars, an atmospheric sci-fi adventure game that seeks to create an immersive astronaut experience in a hopefully alternative version of the future, where humanity is on the brink of extinction and you are tasked with traveling to Mars to answer a distress call and recover these colony ships that are needed to ensure the survival of the race. So the game begins with you and your crew boarding the Zephyr and taking off into space on a flight from Earth to the surface of the moon. They've gone to great lengths to try to emulate what it's like to be an astronaut taking off in a ship, which is kind of cool. But of course, this is a video game and it wouldn't be fun without some drama, so things go wrong, you crash land, and the adventure begins. Now, this isn't an action game. You won't be like shooting Martians here. It's a narrative-driven, kind of more grounded take on an adventure game. There's going to be some navigation and traversal elements. You'll climb terrain and jump gaps, but for the most part, it's a lot of like walking around, exploring, and a ton of puzzle solving. Like, how do I get through this door or past this security console or up to that area over there? You're looking around for clues, you're moving stuff, you're pulling levers, and all the while uncovering bits of narrative. So yeah, this is a game that's very much so focused on the storytelling with a bit of light gameplay elements. And ultimately, you are tasked with trying to find your crew, search for survivors, and recover the arcs, as well as discover the motivations around those who sent the distress call that brought you there in the first place. And this is a sequel, by the way, to the award-winning Deliver Us the Moon, which launched back in 2019 to both critic and user acclaim. The game was very well received, and since then, it looks like they've made quite a few advancements on both the visual and mechanics front, and we'll see how the story holds up to the original as well. And this is actually the only what I would call mid-tier or AA game on the main part of my list, but I do think it looks pretty good, and like I said, the original was very, very well received. Deliver Us Mars launches on February 2nd, and it's coming to PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Hogwarts Legacy is an open-world action RPG that has you embarking on a journey through familiar and new locations in the wizarding world. The game takes place at Hogwarts in the 1800s, where you play as a student who holds the key to an ancient secret. You'll get to create your very own witch or wizard with what looks to be a fairly in-depth character creator, and then head out to explore, discovering magical beasts, crafting potions, taking classes, mastering spells, and partaking in various stories and mysteries within the game. This is a fully open world RPG, allowing you to freely roam around Hogwarts, Hogsmeade, the Forbidden Forest, and other surrounding areas. You can traverse on foot with your broom or other mounts that are in the game. Outside of the main story paths, players will also encounter plenty of other side quests and scenarios, some of which will pose difficult choices that can change the course of the rest of your game. And combat in Hogwarts Legacy has kind of been compared to a spell-slinging version of the Batman Arkham style action combat. You'll be balancing offensive, defensive, and reactive abilities while juggling multiple targets at once, all of course by using the wide range of spells that you learn and unlock as you progress through the game. But of course, it is not all fighting. Lots of time will be spent just wandering around, chatting with NPCs, solving puzzles, playing various mini games. While this isn't a Hogwarts student simulation game, it is more of a typical open world RPG. There is still tons of like student life flavor for you to engage with. There are some things that you might expect would be in the game that are surprisingly not. Things like the inclusion of Quidditch, like they have mini games, but Quidditch isn't one of them. There isn't a morality system, which kind of surprises me. Think like Mass Effect style. And there isn't going to be any co-op or multiplayer, which is a shame as well. That said, all in all, Hogwarts Legacy looks quite impressive, and to be frank, it is likely to be a big contender for Game of the Year in 2023 by my estimation. But as with another game on this month's list, it is also quite divisive, surrounded by a ton of heated conversation right now. Something that I think we should expect to become more common commonplace in the coming years, thanks at least in some part to the games industry having shifted more to be run by corporations. And as such, these large companies, somewhere down the chain, you're going to run into people treating others badly, funding that comes from less than desirable sources, or any other in a long list of grievances that might make someone want to avoid the game. Any of this Hogwarts stuff specifics aside, as I cover games over the years, it becomes harder and harder to find any like big budget or AAA game that doesn't have some fair reasons for people to want to boycott. And this isn't even including like the sourcing of materials, the manufacturing and production of technology that is the backbone of the entire game creation process and industry, and all of the issues that are present there. Honestly, it's very difficult. It is complicated, but I am glad and happy that these conversations are taking place, especially involving those who feel and are the most directly affected. No ethical consumption, right? That's the saying, and it really holds up when you think it through. And I don't have all the answers, that's for sure. But to me, it really, I think, comes down to individuals having to draw their own lines on which of all of the unethical consumption, that is all of it, they're comfortable engaging with. That said, Hogwarts Legacy as a video game is looking really, really good. This will be launching on February 10th. It is coming to PC and console, priced at $59.99. Wild Hearts is a brand new hunting game that looks to offer its own twist on the genre. And of course, by the genre, I'm referring to Monster Hunter. They are making their own different monster hunting game. Although this one has two immediately distinguishing characteristics that set it apart from me. The setting being fantasy feudal Japan, and its use of these contraptions called karakuri that assist you in hunts. We will be playing as hunters who are tasked with tracking down and eliminating the kimono, these massive creatures that are fused with environmental things and capable of reshaping their surroundings. To do this, we'll be using not only our weapons with gameplay that seems to fall in line with others in the hunting genre, but also those karakuri that I mentioned, which are basically contraptions you build on the fly to assist with things like movement, controlling, and attacking bosses. Speaking of which, expect a wide variety of bosses, all covered or fused with some natural elements like vines, rocks, flowers, roots, and ice. Some examples we've seen include giant rats, apes, boars, wolves, birds, beavers, tigers, and dragging-looking things, all of which, just like Monster Hunter, will be fighting for territory and food in one of the game's 4 semi-open world zones. So you'll explore these spaces, various levels of terrain, some of which you can navigate with your special tech. You'll gather resources while also tracking down and hunting the bosses. These levels will also be inhabited with various smaller creatures like rabbits and other woodland beasts. And then of course there is the gear loop of crafting and gathering. It's going to follow the similar formula of go out, hunt, loot, craft, and repeat. Gather resources, get the monster parts, and then use those to make potions, gear, and weapons. This makes you stronger, lets you take on more challenging fights. The bosses and the crafting do look cool, but really it's the weapons and the karakuri that stand out to me. This seems to be quite a large and interesting variety of different weapon types to learn, with some cool combinations. Like there's a katana that transforms into a whip, an umbrella with bladed tips, and a staff that has 5 different weapon transformations. This sounds like the techie weapon in this game. In total, the game will be launching, I guess, with 8 weapons and is expected to get more down the road. And really getting to learn and master the different weapon variations, this is really what these hunting games are all about. That's where half the fun comes from. And then adding on top of that, these karakuri contraptions, which do things like let you make jumping pads, helicopter wings, spring-loaded hammers, time bombs, ballista hooks, and then also massive walls to stop bosses in their tracks. It all looks pretty cool, seems pretty interesting. I am looking forward to it. Wild Hearts will be launching on February 17th, coming to PC and console for $69.99. The Settlers is a city-building real-time strategy game where you gather resources, build a base, construct roads to connect infrastructure, and work towards advancing and creating a thriving settlement. This has been described as a reboot of the franchise, with Ubisoft looking to take the IP in a new direction, both visually and in a gameplay sense. So it's going to feature 3 playable factions, each with their own unique traits and playstyles. There is the Alari, who are craftsmen and builders. They can construct durable buildings and find resources faster. The Maru, who live in harmony with nature and excel at trading and building defenses. And then the Yorn, who are the aggressive, offensive faction that are fast and relentless attackers. So you'll get to explore these large maps. These will be occupied by camps of bandits and enemy forces. You'll search around for resources, capture landmarks, and other key strategic points for rewards. There's trading, research, and food boost systems systems to engage with. And then outside of building up a settlement, you also have full control of various military, support, and siege units that you'll use to defend and attack. The game does appear to have a bigger emphasis on combat than prior installments in the series, although everything is still directly tied to building up a strong economy. There's going to be 3 different modes of play. There's a story-driven single-player campaign, competitive multiplayer, where you can play on large maps with up to 8 players, and then this onslaught mode, which is said to offer difficult challenges for more skilled players. Early reception of this game has been a bit on the negative side. This appears mainly to be due to how far it has strayed from the original Settlers series, which at its core were these deep city and economy building games. This rebooted version appears to be more simplified, stripped down, and closer to an RTS than a city builder. From the outside, I do think this looks neat enough, especially as someone who likes RTS games, but I did want to point out that longtime fans of the series do not seem too pleased. Now, I don't blame Ubisoft for wanting to mix things up. While prolific, the Settler series is still fairly niche. It's not exactly a massive, deeply rooted series, so I do think it makes sense that they try to modernize it a little bit to reach maybe a new and potentially larger audience. That said, if it doesn't catch on with new players and it also alienates older fans of the series, they'll be losing on both counts, which is certainly not what they want either. So I don't know what the right answer is. We'll see how this thing turns out, but the Settlers will be launching on February 17th, coming to PC for $59.99. Atomic Heart is a single-player story-driven FPS set in an alternate history Soviet city where a fleet of robots designed to take over difficult human tasks go rogue and start attacking everyone instead, because of course that's what they would do. After playing through an introduction, Atomic Heart will open up and offer 2 main modes of gameplay. So there's this open world overland area. This consists of big spaces and terrain for you to travel in between visiting the game's facilities. Now, early previews have claimed that this open world is mostly used for farming resources and fighting enemies. You'll walk around, you'll come across a group of robots, you'll start fighting them. There's this alarm system where if you get caught in combat, it will raise the alarm level, kind of GTA style, calling in more reinforcements. But yeah, you just go around fighting enemies, you loot them, you loot containers, and that's basically all there is to do. Some light traversal, but really not a lot to engage with. It's all basically about doing things in between going to the facilities. These are sort of like dungeons. They're more linear with a focus on moving through a set layout of rooms, solving puzzles, fighting bosses, and progressing the narrative of the game. Facilities will include various locations like laboratories, testing stations, power plants, underground complexes, and other science/manufacturing themed places. And yeah, this seems to be where a bulk of the interesting encounters, boss fights, puzzles, and other stuff is. Combat in Atomic Heart will be blending both melee and ranged. You've got a variety of blunt and bladed weapons with light and heavy attacks, and you will mix things up with elemental magic and ranged weapons. So the magic or abilities all stem from your glove, and there's a few different types. There's like electrocutes, freeze, polymer bombs, traps, and levitate abilities. And then your ranged weapons include pistols, rifles, SMGs, shotguns, and RPGs, all that have the potential to apply elemental modifiers. And the game will have some stealth option. You can't play full stealth, but there will be areas in which you can play more quietly and use quiet weapons. In fact, they even have an X-ray vision scanner to let you see enemies and loot through the walls. As I mentioned, there is a loot system where you gather components and then use this to craft and modify your things. The game's going to have 3 different difficulty options. Music in the game was done by Mick Gordon of Doom fame, and they've said the campaign will last somewhere between 20 and 25 hours. Atomic Heart will be releasing on February 21st, coming to PC and console for $59.99. Company of Heroes 3 marks the return of a classic World War II real-time strategy series. This latest installment, set in the Mediterranean, brings with it a host of new gameplay systems, features, and mechanics. You'll alternate between micromanaging troops and units to improve their odds of success in these real-time battles, doing so in between playing from more of a zoomed-out perspective to make large-scale decisions as the general guiding your campaign in turn-based fashion. So they're basically combining the real-time strategy elements of the game with turn-based kind of grand strategy style gameplay. It's a pretty interesting mix-up to the Company of Heroes formula. The game includes 4 unique factions with all new battle groups. You will take control of ground, air, and naval forces, making strategic moves, eliminating targets, building up supply lines, and working to advance on the enemy. They've said that Company of Heroes 3 will also have a greater focus on infantry play with a pacing that is more similar to the original game. Although, as mentioned, plenty of changes and improvements as well. You can make use of flanking moves to expose enemy side armor. There are new infantry breaching mechanics to flush out entrenched areas. You're able to use elevation to enhance your line of sight. On top of that, there's environmental manipulation and destruction of buildings. That's all been ramped up quite a bit. And the game comes with multiple modes, including a story campaign, skirmish mode, and online competitive multiplayer, with maps that are set across the Mediterranean, from the Italian mountain passes to coastal vistas and the deserts of North Africa. I'm happy when any new RTS gets released. It kind of feels like a throwback to a bygone era. Not exactly the heyday of RTS here in 2023, but it's cool to see someone taking a shot at it, and hopefully it does well. Company of Heroes 3 will be launching on February 23rd, coming to PC for $59.99. Sons of the Forest is an open-world survival horror game set on a remote tropical island. You and a team have been sent on a rescue mission looking for a missing billionaire who's lost on an island. As per usual, things do not go as planned. Your helicopter crashes and you find yourself surrounded by cannibals with all sorts of other twisted, horrific creatures. You have to scavenge for resources, fight, and try to survive while conducting your search. Beyond being a horror game that will have plenty of jump scares and stuff to kind of freak you out, it's also a traditional survival game, so you'll search the environment for consumables, hunt for food, and harvest resources that you'll use to build structures, weapons, tools, and other items to survive. There's a fairly deep level of customization for your base building. You're going to be able to split logs to place walls, floors, and ceilings wherever you like, and then use an axe to cut out windows and doors. You can build a fence around your base and then sharpen the post to keep threats out, and there are a lot of threats. The island is full of enemies, from dangerous wildlife to cannibalistic cults and demons, with all sorts of these like humanoids melded together in some rather unsettling ways. And you'll need to defend your base from invasions from these different factions as they try to come in and mess things up. Some other noteworthy features of this sandbox survival game include a ton of freedom of choice. You're not following just one main quest line. Basically, you discover the story at your own pace, however you like. You can even not pay attention to the story at all and just focus primarily on doing the survival thing if you like. There's going to be changing seasons as you move through spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and with every season comes the expected changes to weather. And the game features full-on co-op, as you can play through the entire thing with friends, sharing items, working together to build bases, and take on challenges. And this is a sequel, by the way. The original game, The Forest, came out in 2018, and people really like it. It's got overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, and there's been a lot of anticipation for this follow-up. Sons of the Forest is slated to launch on February 23rd, coming to PC. All right, so those are our main games on this month's list, but as usual, there are quite a few other things I think are worth keeping your eye on. Parish is an upcoming Left 4 Dead inspired indie game that's really caught my attention. It's described as an action FPS that features a co-op campaign where you and up to 3 friends will fight your way through hordes of enemies and take on colossal bosses from ancient mythology while traveling across dilapidated temples, foundries, shipwrecks, and more on your path to Elysium. It's basically like Left 4 Dead or Vermintide or Darktide, but with the inspiration and setting of these ancient Greek, Roman, and Christian mythologies. Wanted Dead is a hybrid slasher shooter from the makers of Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive. The game follows a week in the life of the Zombie Unit, an elite Hong Kong police squad, on a mission to uncover a mysterious conspiracy. The game offers a mix of hack and slash and third-person shooter combat with a ton of different finishers, all in this low-tech 90s cyberpunk world. Really unique looking game here, pretty cool. Returnal is finally coming to PC this month. This is that award-winning third-person bullet hell roguelike shooter that was previously a PlayStation exclusive. The original reviewed pretty well and seemed generally liked when it first came out in April 2021. This PC port will include all of the expected graphical and performance enhancements, along with the suspense cycle, co-op mode, and Tower of Sisyphus update. We've got the sequel to Octopath Traveler this month. That original game was kind of a modern take on retro 2D RPGs. People really liked it. Feel like we see a lot of these style of games come and go over the years, but Octopath looks to be one of the good ones. The sequel will introduce 8 new travelers, improved visuals, a new story, and updated mechanics. Then we've got The Pale Beyond, a narrative-driven adventure RPG where you attempt to solve a mystery of a missing ship and crew in the South Pole. The game appears to mix storytelling, resource management, puzzle solving, and solving of mysteries all into one package. I actually really like the art style of this game, and it was made by Bellular Studios, demos, the game development efforts of a fellow YouTuber and his team. Congratulations to you all, by the way. Love to see it. Pretty cool stuff. And then finally, we've got the sequel to Kerbal Space Program this month, Kerbal Space Program 2, and the Destiny 2 Lightfall expansion. And that is basically it for this month's list. As I mentioned, February is looking like a real strong start to the year. I was hoping to get a little more bangers out of January, but it was really just a handful of titles. Personally, the Dead Space remake is the highlight for me. I do want to check out Hi-Fi Rush once I get the time as well, because I've been hearing a lot of really good things. And yeah, super disappointed that Forsaken, whatever turned out as bad as it did. It's a real shame because I felt like there could have been something there as an open world kind of magic fused game, but it really seems like too much of the game just doesn't deliver. Not that we weren't expecting this, because the impressions from the early hands-on and demos were pretty lukewarm. It's a shame. I do want to spend some more time with it to formulate my own opinion, but the general consensus right now is that Forspoken isn't particularly amazing. Probably better off saving your money for a better title at some point in the future, but that does it for me today. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the list. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.